Okay, think about this for a second. A story that spans well over a century. It's got ambition. It's got these massive setbacks that, could have just ended everything. But then there's this powerful comeback,
Yeah.
and it's all connected to one school in Sierra Leone. So yeah, let's really unpack that today, because that's our deep dive. The history, the sort of tangled history of the United Brethren in Christ Mission. Then there's Centennial Secondary School, and crucially, the Centennial Old Students Association, CeOSA.
Right, and it's that interplay, isn't it, between the mission, the school they built, and then the alumni who really stepped up.
Yeah.
It tells you so much about, well, the long game of international involvement in education, especially in Sierra Leone. I mean, we're talking 1855 right through to now.
Exactly. And the sources you've shared are fantastic for this. We've got articles, historical accounts, research. It really gives us a full picture. So our mission really is to pull out the core insights, understand that layered impact, missionaries, education, national development, and themes like resilience, community power. They seem absolutely key here, especially around the Banff district, Mattru Jong.
It's a really compelling case study when you step back. You get a glimpse into that broader history of missions and education in Africa, the challenges post-colonial nations face, building their education systems, and increasingly the role of diaspora, people living abroad, supporting home. It's all in this story.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. The United Brethren in Christ, or UBC. Who are they? What got them started? And, well, why Sierra Leone?
So the UBC, they actually emerged from spiritual revivals among German-speaking immigrants in the U.S., late 1700s, formally founded in 1800. Key figures. You have Philip William Otterbein, a German Reformed pastor, and Martin Bohm, who was Mennonite. And there's that same story, right? 1767 they meet. Otterbein says, "Wir sind Brüder, we are brethren." Kind of captures that early spirit.
The we are brethren moment,
Yeah.
right?
And Christian Newcomer was another really important early leader, especially around what's now West Virginia.
So what was their core theology? What drove them?
Well, it had a lot in common with Methodism. Justification by faith, definitely central, but also a really strong emphasis on holy living, personal piety. Early on, it was very much about evangelism, spreading the word, conversions. Social reform came more into focus a bit later. And that evangelical drive, that's really what fueled their expansion across the U.S. into Canada by the mid-1800s.
Okay, so they're expanding in North America. How does the leap to Africa happen? That's a big step.
It is. That global vision starts to take shape in 1853. They set up the Home, Frontier, and Foreign Missionary Society. That was the body specifically for outreach beyond North America.
Oh, yeah.
And then later, the Women's Missionary Association, the WMA, was formed. They became hugely important, especially in education and health.
Right.
Eventually, much later, those two merged into UB Global. But the initial push for overseas missions came from that 1853 society. And one of their very first moves was looking towards Africa. They resolved to send missionaries there basically as soon as they could.
And Sierra Leone becomes the place. Their first, and for a long time, their only overseas mission field. That's quite a commitment.
It really is.
Yeah.
1855, just 2 years after setting up the society, they sent the first team. 3 missionaries, Reverend W.J. Shuey, Daniel Kimmler Flickinger, and Dr. D.C. Cumler. Their job was to, quote, spy out Sierra Leone. They landed in Freetown in February 1855.
Wow.
And yeah, for the next 80 years, Sierra Leone was it. Their sole international focus.
Why there, specifically? Any clues in the sources? I mean, West Africa was known as the white man's grave back then. Risky.
The sources don't spell it out definitively, but you can piece together likely reasons. Sierra Leone, particularly Freetown, being a British crown colony, probably made it seem, well, more accessible. It had that history as a settlement for liberated Africans, too.
Kind of a bridgehead.
Maybe. It gave it some connection to the West, even with the climate challenges. Plus, other missions were already there, the CMS, Wesleyans. That might have offered some familiarity, maybe even logistical help early on.
So, a bit of strategic thinking involved, not just pointing at a map.
Seems like it. That initial phase was definitely exploratory. Shuey, Flickinger, Kumler, they traveled the coast, went up rivers looking for the right spot. They even stayed for a bit at the American Missionary Association station at Good Hope on Showbro Island. Used it as a base.
Practical. Adaptable.
Exactly. Building on what was there, not just sticking to a rigid plan.
Now, these early missionaries, they had ideas, philosophies shaping their work, right?
Yeah.
Not just about religion. Who are the key players?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Daniel Cumler Flickinger really stands out. Part of that first group in 55. He went back and forth between the U.S. and Africa many times. He was key in setting up the first stations, like Shenge, that involved negotiating with Chief Conquer.
Right.
And Flickinger, he strongly believed in the basic equality and educability of Africans. He argued any differences were down to environment, lack of education access, not inherent racial issues.
That feels pretty progressive for the mid-19th century.
It really was. And it led directly to his push for native agency,
Meaning?
training local converts to be leaders, evangelists in their own communities. He supported educating people like Daniel Flickinger Wilberforce, a Sierra Leonean who studied in the U.S. Flickinger documented all this in his book, Ethiopia, or 26 Years of Missionary Life. It's a valuable account. That belief in local capacity was huge.
Who else made a big mark early on?
Joseph Gomer, an African-American missionary, arrived in 1871 based in Shenj. He brought a very practical approach, taught better farming methods, set up an industrial school, actually fundraised for it himself in the U.S.
Yeah, practical skills.
Yeah, and introduced cash crops, coffee, rubber. He saw the link between, spiritual and material well-being. And he was apparently very successful in building relationships, eventually converting the local chief in Sherbro, a different style of engagement.
So practical skills, economic development, alongside the faith aspect. Interesting mix.
Then later you get figures like Lloyd Missionary, early 20th century. He represented maybe a shift towards more cultural sensitivity. He focused on trying to understand indigenous Christianity from the inside, respecting existing worldviews more.
So an evolution in their approach over time. Makes sense. What about the women? The Women's Missionary Association, the WMA, you said they were vital.
Absolutely crucial. The WMA specifically targeted education and health care for women and girls. Emily Beacon was their first missionary, sent to Rotefunk in 1876 to start a school. Later, you had dedicated medical women like Dr. Marietta Hatfield, Dr. Mary C. Archer, Ella Schenck developing the hospital work at Rotefunk.
So Rotefunk was a key WMA center.
A very important hub, yes, but also a place of tragedy.
Oh.
During the 1898 Hut Tax War, Hatfield, Archer, Schenck, and several other UBC missionaries were killed.
Why? What happened?
The Hut Tax War was an uprising against British colonial taxes. Missionaries were often seen as linked to the colonial regime, intentionally or not, so they became targets.
Wow. That's a harsh reminder of the context they were operating in, the risks.
Exactly. Their deaths highlight the dangers, the complex politics.
So summing up that early impact, missionaries, indigenous culture, education, it sounds complex.
Very complex.
Yeah.
Education was definitely a primary tool for evangelism. Schools popped up alongside churches. They brought Western literacy, numeracy. That created opportunities, no doubt. But it also challenged traditional knowledge, traditional structures, secret societies, certain beliefs.
The double-edged sword, perhaps.
You could say that. There was always that tension between their aim of upliftment and a kind of paternalism, an assumption of Western superiority. Even the native agency strategy, while aiming to empower, was also about shaping converts in a Western Christian mold.
Right.
But the tangible benefit schools, hospitals, were real draws. People engaged partly because of those practical advantages. And as we saw, missionary approaches did evolve. Gomer's practicality, Missionary's introspection, and the WMA's focus really did make a difference for women and girls.
Okay, so fast forward. After a century of this, by 1955, what did the UBC landscape look like in Sierra Leone, particularly in Bantha district?
By 1955, they had a really substantial presence, especially in Bantha. Over 60 churches, numerous primary schools scattered throughout the area, and importantly, 5 high schools by then, plus at least 2 major hospitals, Mattru and Rotefunk, a significant network.
Mattru Jong keeps coming up. How did it become such a focal point?
Well, after their initial explorations, Chengay on Sherbro Island was an early base. But a key move was taking over the American Missionary Association's Mende mission, which was based in Bonthtown. That gave them a foothold among the Mende people.
Okay.
Mattru Jong, being on the Jong River, grew strategically. Its location was useful, but the big boost came with the medical work, which led to Mattru Hospital. The decision to build a major hospital there after WWII was driven by several things: central location for their work, growing trade, potential as a political hub, and apparently direct encouragement from the government too.
Interesting.
Yeah. So while Rotefunk and Moyamba district stayed vital, especially for WMA work, Mattru Jong really emerged as a key operational center for the UBC in that region.
Let's revisit that relationship. The mission, the colonial government, education. You said it was symbiotic, but also had tensions?
Exactly. Symbiotic because missionaries saw education as vital for evangelism. People needed to read the Bible. The colonial government saw it as a way to train locals for lower-level administrative jobs. Cheap labor, basically.
So they cooperated.
Often, yes. Churches like UBC ran schools, and the government provided grants and aid, mostly for teacher salaries. But tensions arose when the government started wanting more say in the curriculum. Missionaries worried the religious focus might get watered down.
And that closeness to the colonial power structure, as we saw with the Hut Tax War, could be dangerous.
Critically dangerous. The 1898 Hut Tax War was a direct result of colonial policy, but missionaries got caught in the crossfire because they were perceived as part of that system. The losses at Rotofunk were immense, lives lost, property destroyed. It shows the risks of operating in that colonial space where lines blur.
Yet they rebuilt. That resilience seems key.
Absolutely key. Rebuilding after 1898 showed their determination. That ability to persist through massive challenges is a defining feature of their century there.
Beyond religion and education, what about other contributions in that first century? Health, agriculture.
Yes, definitely significant contributions there. Healthcare. Mattru Hospital grew from a small dispensary in 1950 into a major facility with specialized units, dozens of beds, vital for the region. And Rotofunk Hospital, founded earlier by the WMA, also became huge thanks to people like Dr. Mabel Silver.
Impacting lives directly.
Hugely. Saving lives, easing suffering, but also building trust with communities, which helped their other work. The government even saw Mattru Hospital's location as strategic for its own plans.
And agriculture. You mentioned Gomer.
Gomer's work at Shenge in the late 1800s was important, introducing better farming, cash crops like coffee and rubber. That has a lasting economic effect. The UBC also had broader agricultural projects aimed at self-sufficiency for communities. That practical focus remained part of their approach.
So a holistic mission. What about wider social development?
Education was the biggest driver there. More schools, primary than secondary, meant higher literacy, more social mobility. An unintended consequence, perhaps, was creating an educated class that contributed to national life later on.
Right.
Plus, the industrial schools, Gomer's for instance, taught practical skills. And the WMA's focus on women's education and health absolutely influenced gender roles. And the mission stations themselves often became centers of settlement, bringing infrastructure, new ideas, fostering social change.
Okay, so that first century really sets the stage, which brings us to 1955 and Centennial Secondary School. Let's dive into part 2, the founding of this landmark school.
Yes, the founding of Centennial Secondary School, CSS, in 1955. A truly pivotal moment, marking the UBC mission centenary, but also profoundly shaping education, especially in rural Bantha district.
What was happening in Sierra Leone then? What was the context, the need that led to CSF?
Well, mid-20th century, you've got rising nationalism. Sierra Leone's moving towards independence, which came in 61. Demand for secondary education was growing rapidly. The quality schools were almost all in Freetown, the capital.
Like the grammar schools, Annie Walsh?
Exactly, those established city schools. The protectorate, the rural hinterland where most people lived, was massively underserved. There are stats from '58 showing a huge gap in school access between the colony, the Freetown area, and the protectorate.
Right.
And the UBC, having been in Bantha for a century with primary schools, Mattru Hospital, they created a pool of primary leavers who needed a secondary option locally. Plus, globally, post-WWII, there's this big emphasis on education for development. So CSS made both a local need and fit the broader international trend.
And the name Centennial, directly tied to that 100-year mark.
Absolutely explicit. Founded to mark 100 years since the UBC arrived in 1855. The foundation stone was laid, school dedicated, January 7th, 1955. Exactly 100 years. So the name Centennial is a testament to that century of work, the perseverance, and a commitment looking forward. And founding a secondary school was a fitting way to market a deeper investment in human capital as independence approached.
Who are the driving forces behind it? The founders, the first educators?
Reverend E. DeWitt Baker, he's the central figure. Arrived in '49, really spearheaded the whole thing. I mean, he oversaw everything. Ordering materials, supervising up to 100 workers, building the first 15 buildings, dorms, classrooms, admin, library.
Hands-on.
Very hands-on. He was the first principal, too, involved in teaching, chapel, finance, even manual labor. He and his wife, Evelyn Baker, shared that vision of a Christ-centered school. She was a co-founder in every sense.
And they faced personal hardship, too.
Yes. Tragically, they lost their youngest son on the Jong River. It underscores the personal sacrifice involved. Rita Wild Karoma was another key early figure. Arrived in '54, taught for 10 years, even served as interim principal for a year. Showed leadership.
But what was their core vision?
The official aim was sound Christian education to boys and girls who fulfill the entrance requirements. The motto, Pro Deo et Patria, for God and country.
Okay.
The objective, raise patriotic, God-fearing youth to contribute to faith and nation.
And CSS was pioneering in its structure too, wasn't it?
It was critically important. It was Sierra Leone, the first experimental coeducational boarding school.
Co-ed boarding in a rural area in 1955. That's innovative.
Highly innovative. Showed a commitment to equal opportunity for boys and girls, and aimed to create that focused residential learning environment. It opened January 24th, 1955, with about 90 students initially. But the vision went beyond academics. It was about encountering Christ, following Jesus, becoming ambassadors. The Greater Love Chapel symbolized that. The sheer effort and sacrifice of founders like the Bakers was incredible. It really set the tone.
Okay, so Sierra Leone gains independence in 1961. How does CSS navigate the post-colonial era? How does it adapt?
Well, post-independence brought major education reforms. Expanding access was key, aligning curricula with national needs. CSS, being a grant-aided mission school, government-funded but church-owned, had to adapt. Aligning its curriculum with national standards, preparing students for the WAEC exams, the West African Examinations Council, GCE O-levels back then, later BDCE and AUSI. Its board of governors had reps from both the proprietors, UBC successors, and the government.
So a mix of influences.
Right. But it kept offering a broad curriculum, core academics plus practical subjects like woodwork, domestic science, ag science, alongside Bible knowledge. The challenge was always balancing that founding ethos and quality with the national framework.
And CSS carved out a special niche during this period, didn't it?
It really did. As that first rural co-ed boarding school, it quickly became a model. It built a strong academic reputation, especially in sciences through the 60s, 70s, 80s, often ranked among the country's best.
Challenging that Freetown bias.
Exactly. Showed high-quality rural secondary education was possible. And the boarding was crucial for access. Kids came from remote villages. It was safer for girls, too. In fact, it drew students from all over Sierra Leone, even Liberia, Lesotho sometimes. That shows its standing, a real educational hub.
So its early success serves as an example.
Implicitly, yes. A model for rural secondary ed.
What about enrollment numbers, academic results over the decades, and its contribution to the nation?
Enrollment grew steadily, from maybe 90 at the start to around 300 by the mid-60s, maybe 600 students and 31 staff by the mid-80s.
And academically strong during that time.
Very strong, yes. Consistently high performance in national exams back then. But then the Civil War hit. That caused a massive decline. The sources mention insignificant public examination results for over 2 decades post-war. Just devastating.
But there's been a recovery.
A remarkable turnaround, actually. Largely thanks to CeOSA, the Old Students Association, and their partnership with Engineers Without Borders.
Yeah.
You see results jump dramatically after their rehab work. Like, the BECE pass rate went from 14% to 92% in 2016. WASC from 1% to 45%. Huge improvement.
That's incredible.
It is. And CSS's contribution to the nation. Look at the alumni. Engineers, doctors, professors, ambassadors, lawyers, government leaders, both in Sierra Leone and abroad. It really fulfilled that aim of producing patriotic and God-fearing citizens contributing to the nation.
Although the war showed how fragile those games could be.
Absolutely. Underscores the need for stability. And importantly, being co-ed from the start likely boosted girls' opportunities and fostered female leaders among the alumni too.
Okay, CSS clearly faced immense challenges over its 70 years. Let's unpack those. The Civil War seems the biggest shadow.
Without question. The Civil War, 1991 to 2002, was catastrophic for CSS. Rebel forces occupied the school, massive destruction of infrastructure, water, sanitation, electricity systems totally wrecked, widespread looting.
An environment completely hostile to learning.
Utterly.
Yeah.
Led to that lost decade of education. It was part of a national disaster. Over 1,200 primary schools destroyed countrywide, most kids out of school by 2001. Schools were targets.
That's for CSS specifically.
Described as deteriorating into total chaotic failure. Those terrible exam results for 2 decades post-war reflect that. Teachers, students displaced, trauma, just awful.
Beyond the war, what other persistent struggles has CSS faced?
Even outside the war years, chronic resource limits have been a constant battle. Think about it.
Yeah.
Post-war, maybe 1,800 students, but basically no working water, sanitation, or electricity. How do you learn?
Right. And teachers.
Teacher shortages, especially qualified ones in science, math, that's a national issue, but worse in rural areas like Mattru Jong. Hard to attract and keep good teachers. War displacement made it worse. Salary delays don't help morale either. And curriculum relevance is an ongoing thing. CSS offered a broad curriculum, but meeting today's needs, ICT skills, relevant vocational training needs constant updating. Plus other crises hit the country, economic problems, Ebola, all straining resources further.
Yet despite all this, resilience, how did CSS bounce back?
That resilience is remarkable, and it's largely down to two things: the incredible commitment of its alumni, CeOSA, and strategic partnerships. The big turning point was the CeOSA partnership with Engineers Without Borders, Lehigh Valley Professionals EWB-LVP, starting around 2010.
What did they do?
Focused on critical infrastructure, restored clean water depot, solar distribution, improved sanitation urinals, flushed toilets, provided solar electricity for classrooms, library, the water pump, repaired key buildings, science labs, chapel.
Essential groundwork.
Absolutely. Other partners helped too: Rotary, Peace Corps, and they set up the Centennial Infrastructure Improvement Board, CIB, for maintenance. That's smart.
In government policy.
The government's free basic education policy, paying teacher salaries, even with delays, that provided an essential framework. And CeOSA branches, like the UK one, did their own fundraising too. For the auditorium, roofing, that revolving fund for teacher salaries.
So a real multi-pronged effort.
Exactly. Driven by alumni passion, boosted by international partners within a supportive government framework, and involving the local community. It's a powerful story of revival. Shows the direct link between basic infrastructure and learning outcomes. Lots of lessons there.
Okay, let's really focus on the alumni now. Part 3, CeOSA. How did this crucial association get started and grow?
Well, CeOSA in Sierra Leone itself got a major boost, a revival really, back in 1988, spearheaded by Abu Hassan Askia Karoma, who was just out of college then. It marked a renewed drive among former students to get involved. After that revival, CeOSA Sierra Leone grew its activities, started holding annual national conventions. These became vital for bringing people together, unifying, strategizing. Momo J. Bakary was the first president of that revived CeOSA-SL. And many others were instrumental early on: Daniel Fox, Gabriel Salou, Mahmoud Kamara, Saleh Beckley, and quite a few others.
Abu Hassan Karoma again. He seems central. Tell us more about him and his role.
He really is central. Askia, as he's known, a proud CSS alum himself, attended late 70s Baker House, even went to the UBC primary school in Mattru. He was a leader at CSS class monitor, student council, senior prefect, house captain, studied art and crafts, then international relations, social entrepreneurship.
So deeply connected.
Very. His role in that '88 revival as National Organizing Secretary was critical for mobilizing alumni in Sierra Leone. Even if the exact title is debated, his foundational role is clear. Then later, he becomes a key figure in CeOSA North America, chairman and president of the interim board in 2015-16. He was instrumental in formally incorporating CeOSA North America as a nonprofit in Pennsylvania in 2015, getting that 501c status vital for U.S. fundraising.
Ah, the legal structure. Important.
Yes, crucial. He often chaired their conventions, guided strategy, kept information flowing, mobilized people. A 2017 source calls him CeOSA USA president then, and his advocacy, his fundraising efforts, central to CeOSA North America's support for CSS. That formal structure created credible donation channels, like the Scholarship Fund.
Right.
He's been consistent in mobilization, publicity, attended conventions focused on support, equipment, infrastructure, supported the Baker family too. Plus, he founded his own youth empowerment NGO, the African Youth Movement, AYM, focused on rural youth, which could indirectly benefit Mattru Jong.
So COHC isn't just in Sierra Leone, it's global. Tell us about the branches.
That's right. It's a global network now. Active branches in Sierra Leone, North America, U.S., Canada, and the UK Ireland. CeOSA Sierra Leone is the home base, organizes conventions, links with the school and local community, implements projects. CeOSA North America kicked off in 2001 in Baltimore, initially called the United Brethren Association. Francis Mustafa was interim president. Reverend Joseph Abu supported it. Then the formal incorporation in PA in 2015, led by Askia Karoma. They were key players in those EWB infrastructure projects and do their own fundraising.
And the UK branch.
CeOSA UK Ireland is also very active. Fundraising for the auditorium renovation, classroom roofing, scholarships, that teacher salary revolving fund. They're a registered charity in the UK Centennial Students Association, number 1194603. Their objectives are all about supporting CSS.
And they coordinate.
Yes, that's key. The branches talk, coordinate plans, sometimes pool resources. The global network lets them tap into diverse funding, different expertise. It's a real strength.
What's the tangible impact CSA has had? Infrastructure, scholarships. It sounds like they've been the driving force behind the school's recovery.
Transformative is the word. Infrastructure-wise, that CSA North America partnership with EWB-LVP around 2010-2017 was absolutely fundamental post-war. Clean water, sanitation, solar powerful lights, and the pump. Building repairs, science labs, chapel. They tackled the basics that make learning possible.
Right. The foundations.
Exactly. And CSA UK has also focused on infrastructure, the auditorium recently, re-roofing classrooms. And again, these upgrades correlate directly with improved academic results. Global fundraising continues.
What about direct support for students and teachers?
Scholarships are huge. CSA North America has its tax-deductible fund. My CSA, the online platform, talks about supporting thousands. CSA UK awarded £3,000 to 3 students just last year and sponsored others who've now graduated, crucial for needy kids.
And teachers?
That revolving fund, mainly driven by CeOSA UK collaborating with others to cover salaries during government delays. That's vital for teacher morale, keeping good staff.
So, beyond buildings and money, how else does CeOSA boost student welfare and build human capital? Health? Technology? Mentoring?
Well, direct health interventions are maybe less prominent, but the clean water and sanitation from the EWB partnership, massive health benefits right there. Technology, yes. CeOSA North America lists ICT as a program area. My CeOSA talks about STEM promotion workshops, camps on robotics, coding, competitions, mentorship, funding for equipment.
And the solar lights must help study.
Big time. Evening study becomes possible. For human capital, my CeOSA describes youth empowerment initiatives, skills workshops, computers, financial literacy, entrepreneurship, vocational skills, and crucially, mentorship programs connecting current students with experienced alumni. Role models, advisors, networking, both one-on-one and group sessions.
Leadership development, too.
It's maybe less structured as formal leadership training, but it's inherent in the alumni engagement, the roles within CeOSA itself. The goal is empowering youth as leaders, innovators, changemakers. So yeah, CLC's impact is incredibly broad. Infrastructure, finance, teacher support, modern skills, mentorship, indispensable for CSS, a powerful model.
The impact of a school is often seen best through its graduates. Who are some notable CSS alumni? What have they achieved?
CSS has produced some really impressive people. The My CeOSA Alumni Success Stories section highlights this. Just a few examples. Dr. Fatmata Kamara, an infectious disease specialist. Huge role in fighting Ebola, malaria, strengthening Sierra Leone's health system. Mr. Ibrahim Sese focused on youth empowerment through education. Started a scholarship program helping hundreds of underprivileged kids in Mattru Jong. Mrs. Aminata Karoma, a trailblazer for women in STEM. Overcame barriers, now advocates for gender equality in STEM, mentors young women. Mr. Mohammed Bangura, a leader in community development right there in Mattru Jong. Initiatives for healthcare, clean water, education, real civic leadership. Ms. Mariama Kante, a successful entrepreneur, built a business empire in Mattru Jong, provides jobs, involved in philanthropy scholarships, training, infrastructure.
Wow, quite a range.
And, of course, Abu Hassan Askia Corona, with all his CSA work and youth empowerment focus. Reverend Joseph C. Abu, longtime CSA USA president.
Right.
Dr. Loretta Wilsilla, CSA North America Secretary General. Mr. Cherno Mohammed Sese from the class of 70 with his political science background. Mr. J. Allen Kapenge, the first Sierra Leonean principal. It's just a snapshot, but shows the diversity and impact.
And how do these alumni seem to view CSS's influence on their lives? What's the common feeling?
The success stories strongly imply CSS was deeply formative, shaped their values, work ethic, gave them skills, confidence. You see their achievements, their service.
Yeah.
It echoes that school motto, Pro Deo et Patria. Mohammed Bangura's community leadership, Aminata Karoma's drive, Mariama Kante's entrepreneurship. You can trace it back.
And their dedication to CSA itself speaks volumes.
Absolutely. That commitment to rebuild and support the school is probably the most powerful testament to the values and loyalty CSS instilled. The impact is clearly lasting.
Truly illustrates the legacy. Okay, let's look ahead now. Part 4, education policy and the future path for CSS. Let's start with the bigger picture, comparing education in colonial times versus independent Sierra Leone.
Right. Understanding today means looking back. Colonial era education started largely by missionaries for evangelism. Later, the colonial government saw it useful for training a small elite for administration. Access was very limited, very elitist, huge gap between Freetown and the rural protectorate.
You had Fora Bay College early in Freetown, Bow School later in the protectorate.
Exactly. Bow School was an exception, for chief's sons mainly. Curriculum was Western, though missions like UBC added some practical skills. The Phelps-Stokes Commission pushed a more basic, agricultural focus for the masses. Post-independence. Big shift. Education seen as a universal right, key to development human capital theory.
So the goal became expansion.
Massive expansion, especially primary level, aiming for universal primary education. The 58 white paper wanted to double enrollment, fix that colony protectorate gap. Curriculum diversified tech vocational added. The 6334 system came in 93. And recently, the Free Quality School Education Initiative in 2018 caused a huge enrollment jump.
But challenges remain.
Big challenges. Accessibility is way up compared to colonial times. Enrollment stats show that. But equity, rural, urban, girls finishing school, and quality are still major concerns. Underfunding, teacher shortages, infrastructure gaps persist.
So how would you critically compare those models, colonial missionary versus the state education that followed?
The colonial missionary model was driven by evangelism. Education was a tool. Basic literacy, numeracy, religion, some practical skills health like UBC. Curricula were Western, limited local relevance, though some used local languages early on, managed by missions, some government grants, but fairly autonomous. They pioneered education in many areas.
Downsides.
Limited access, potential cultural alienation, quality varied, sometimes seen as too academic or bookish, and that association with colonial power, the colonial state model. Very limited direct provision except Bow School. Mostly relied on mission schools with grants and oversight.
And post-independence state model.
Aimed for universal access, education for nation building, centralized policy, curriculum, national curriculum framework, national exams, WAEC, more government funding, direct management alongside grant-aided schools. Emphasis on national unity, citizenship, national languages.
But the implementation.
That's where the struggles are. Resources, instability, corruption, teacher shortages, weak management. Quality often suffered with rapid expansion. Bureaucracy, focus on diplomas over skills, sometimes diploma disease. And overcoming those historical inequalities is tough.
So comparing them.
Missionary education was foundational, strong moral ethos, but culturally prescriptive. State model aimed for broader access, national relevance, but hit practical walls. Different primary motives, evangelism versus nation building, though the lines blurred as missions adapted and the state still relied on them.
Given all that, what's the role of religious institutions in education today in Sierra Leone? Is it still significant?
Oh, absolutely significant. Religious institutions like the UMC, the UBC successor, are still major proprietors of primary and secondary schools. Many operate under that grant-aided system. Government pays teachers, religious body owns the property, influences the ethos.
How has the partnership with government changed?
It's evolved. Colonial missions had more autonomy. Post-independence, the state asserted more control over curriculum standards. That sometimes caused friction, like over how much religious ed. But the current view, as articulated by officials like Minister Chernarva in 2025, seems to be a soft line. Recognizing the value of religious bodies' moral guidance, education provision, while ensuring state policies are inclusive.
What value do they bring now?
History, extensive networks, especially in rural areas, often strong discipline and moral values, contributing to literacy, critical thinking, leadership. Role in reconciliation, too. They face the same challenges as government schools, of course funding, resources, but their enduring role shows a pragmatic recognition. They're vital partners.
Okay, looking forward. What's a vision for CSS in the 21st century? How can it thrive?
The vision should be for CSS to be a leading rural secondary school, known for academic excellence, strong Christian values, producing well-rounded grads who are tech-savvy, civically engaged. Key elements. First, digitization. Proper computer labs, internet, digital literacy for everyone, using software, online resources, digital admin systems, aligning with national ICT goals.
A second.
Curriculum innovation. Strengthen STEM, modern labs, hands-on learning, improve TVT woodwork, domestic science, agriculture, maybe new trades relevant today, integrate critical thinking, problem-solving, creativity across subjects, enhance civic, peace, environmental education.
And third,
long-term sustainability. Diverse funding, maybe income-generating projects. Strengthen that maintenance board, the CII. Invest in teacher development. Foster community ownership. Build an endowment fund, CeOSA, philanthropy.
And CeOSA's strategic vision. How can they help make CSS a center of excellence?
CSS's vision is clear. Transform CSS into a 21st century academic institution with strong Christian foundations and academic excellence. CeOSA UK talks about restoring former glory, recreating that golden era. Their potential is huge. Resource mobilization fundraising globally, programmatic support, ICT, STEM, TVE, youth empowerment, mentoring, using alumni expertise, advocacy and networking, raising the school's profile, building partnerships, fostering excellence, pushing high standards, strategic planning, coordinating across branches, aligning with school and national goals.
So channeling their energy strategically.
Exactly. If they can strategically channel those resources, that expertise, that advocacy aligned with a solid school development plan developed with CSS leadership, they can absolutely make it a center of excellence, a national model for rural education.
Finally then, specific policy recommendations for the government and for non-state actors like CeOSA.
Okay, for the government of Sierra Leone, MBSSE, TSC. 1. Prioritize rural education infrastructure. Sustain funding for water, sanitation, power, labs, libraries. 2. Strengthen teacher deployment and support in rural areas. Incentives for qualified STEM teachers, fixed salary delays. 3. Support curriculum diversification. Balance academics and relevant TVET, provide resources for practical subjects. 4. Invest in EdTech for rural schools. National strategy for connectivity, hardware, training. 5. Enhance school governance. Strengthen boards, community participation, timely subventions. 6. Streamline and support partnerships with alumni groups, NGOs. Make it easier to collaborate.
Okay. And for non-state actors, CeOSA, NGOs, development partners.
1. Coordinate efforts. Avoid duplication. Maximize resources. CeOSA's inter-branch work is a good model here. 2. Focus on sustainability. Long-term plans for projects, build local capacity, think about ongoing operational costs. 3. Invest in teacher professional development, modern teaching methods, ICT, specialized subjects. 4. Expand mentorship and career guidance. Leverage those alumni networks. 5. Advocate for systemic change. Push for better national policies, fair resource distribution, good governance and education.
Implementing those could really strengthen CSS and rural education overall.
Definitely. It needs that collaborative approach.
This has been a really rich deep dive. Over 150 years of history, struggle, and achievement. If we had to boil it down, what are the absolute key takeaways?
I'd say 1. The foundational long-term impact of the UBC mission. 2. The symbolic and practical importance of Centennial Secondary School's founding. 3. The incredible resilience shown by the school, especially through the Civil War. And 4. The absolutely vital transformative role of CeOSA, the alumni, in sustaining and reviving the school.
It really underscores that dynamic, doesn't it, between the initial outside influence and the powerful internal agency, the local commitment, now driving things forward.
Precisely. And the impact of CSS alumni on Sierra Leone across so many sectors is maybe the ultimate testament to the school's legacy and the values it fostered.
It really is. It makes you reflect, doesn't it, on the power of collective action, especially diaspora engagement in rebuilding institutions and driving progress, particularly in places recovering from conflict. What other lessons might you, our listeners, draw from this story of CSS and CeOSA? How might it apply to other fields, other contexts you know? We hope this deep dive sparks further thought and maybe exploration into Sierra Leone's educational history or the role of faith-based groups in development. Thank you for joining us.